My practice started in 2010. I've had up to a 2.5 year waiting list. And I hate having to tell people, sorry, there's nothing I can do. Know what it looks like when they're having a panic attack, but they didn't necessarily realize that, chewing on their lip was a symptom of their anxiety when it was a lot lower. So it takes time to kind of figure that out and understand it. Vulnerability, fear, anxiety, self-doubt, loneliness, right? All those kind of emotions start to come out. So again, we can even use those unhealthy coping strategies as cues to help us figure out and sort through things. People look at anxiety as, it's about the trigger, right? I have anxiety of heights. Well, if it was about heights, everyone would have anxiety of heights. Anxiety is about my belief in my ability to handle it.
In this episode of Awake Insights, I speak with Sabrina Trobak. Sabrina is a seasoned educator, counselor, and published author with a deep passion for mental health and holistic therapy. With over 20 years of experience in the public school system as a teacher, vice principal, and school counselor, she transitions into counseling full-time, founding Trobak Holistic Counseling in 2010. Holding a master's degree in counseling psychology, Sabrina specializes in post-trauma holistic therapy. She is also the author of Not Good Enough, Understanding Your Core Beliefs and Anxiety, published in 2023. A resource for those seeking mental health support. Since 2012, she has served as a clinical supervisor, guiding other professionals in the field. This episode is one with a lot of golden nuggets, a lot of tips, a lot of good advice that you can use in your daily life. So please spend good attention on it. Enjoy the episode, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. Like the episode if you like it, of course, at the end, or give a comment if that's something you are willing to do. Thank you very much and enjoy the conversation. Welcome in the Awake Insight, Sabrina.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
It's great to have someone with so much experience here in this episode. I really like it. Sometimes that gives like a guarantee that we can go pretty deep in certain kind of topics. I would like to start actually by asking you what inspired you to write the book, Not Good Enough.
When I started my private practice in counseling, so the model of therapy that I practice focuses on the idea of comes back to that core belief feeling not good enough, not important, not valued. So people who are struggling, having anxiety, depression, had a lot of past trauma, often that core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued. To challenge and change that core belief takes time. So most of my clients are with me for a year, year and a half, 2 years, sometimes even a bit longer. So within 6 months of starting, I've had a waiting list. My practice started in 2010. I've had up to a 2.5 year waiting list. And I hate having to tell people, sorry, there's nothing I can do. And so I decided to write the book as a way to provide a resource for people who are looking at wanting to address their mental health, but for whatever reason aren't able or wanting to go to counseling at that point.
Yeah. And feeling not good enough is at the core of mental health issues because you emphasize so much on that.
I think it's a bit of a catch-22. It definitely creates a lot of insecurity, self-doubt, which can lead more to mental health, like anxiety, depression, those kind of things. When we look at other mental health, like bipolar 1, bipolar 2, even autism spectrum, all those come at a cost, and we have to struggle a bit more with life. And so that reinforces and supports that core belief. So then that core belief is often there as well.
Yeah. And how does that core belief develop? Can you explain that a little bit over time?
Yeah, very slowly over time. And honestly, even before you're born, if we look back at parents, we often see that parents also had that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued. So if I have two parents whose core belief is that, how can I develop the core belief good enough, important, and valued? So this goes back, honestly, even generations. And so with every experience, the experience, especially trauma, there is an impact. There's no doubt about it. But what really reinforces and supports that core belief is how that is handled and sorted through. Often we just minimize it, pretend it's not really there, don't ever go back and talk about it. So it just sits with us. Over
Mm.
time, that just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, reinforcing more and more that core belief. Whereas if something
Mhm.
happens and I can go and talk to my parent, we can sort through it, talk about emotions, I feel safe, I feel connected, I'm able to feel my emotions and let them out, I don't have to carry it as much. So then that core belief, good enough, important, and valued, is starting to grow and develop. So it's how the experiences are handled that is as important as the traumas that we experience as well.
Mm. Yeah. You also talk a lot about anxiety in general. Can you explain how that related is to that core belief that you just explained, actually? How important it is to acknowledge that anxiety? And maybe it's too many questions at the same time, but I'm going to ask it anyways. How do you see the state of humanity these days in terms of anxiety?
So, I mean, anxiety is pretty significant. I think it's been an issue for many, many, many years, but we didn't really talk about it. We didn't really know what it was. So it's exasperated now just with kind of the state of everything that's going on with social media and just having access to so much more. When I grew up, we had two channels on our TV and that was it. So I wasn't exposed to as much. So those kind of things definitely feed into it. But I think the knowledge and the awareness has made us more aware of it. So we see more of it for sure. But anxiety is a direct result of that core belief not good enough, not important, not valued. If I feel not good enough, I'm going to have more insecurity and more self doubt, which is anxiety. A lot of people look at anxiety as, it's about the trigger, right? I have anxiety of heights. Well, if it was about heights, everyone would have anxiety of heights. Anxiety is about my belief in my ability to handle it. So if I believe I can handle something, I'm not going to have anxiety. If I believe I can't handle something, I'm going to have more anxiety. So if my core belief is not good enough, I'm going to have more insecurity. I'm not going to believe in myself. Therefore, I'm likely going to have higher anxiety. So what we need to do to really address anxiety is get better at challenging that core belief and figuring out how do I work through this so I believe I can handle it, then the anxiety will go down.
Hmm. But there's a reason why people have anxiety or are afraid of something. It's because, yeah, it's exactly what you say, the belief that they have to do something that is sometimes dangerous, life threatening, or anything else. But in some ways, it can be life threatening. So the fear and the anxiety is there for a good reason. But in many cases, I guess it's not there for a good reason. So when do you know it's good to listen to it, and when it's not?
So, good point. We talk about anxiety being real danger and a sense of danger. So, real danger is I am in danger. My life is being threatened. We need that kind of anxiety. We need that fight, flight, freeze response to keep us alive. So, we don't want to get rid of anxiety. We just have to figure out which kind of anxiety is and how do we manage it. So, if someone's banging on my front door, I need that anxiety to keep me alive. I need to run away. I need to call 911, whatever it might be. I don't know. I think it's 999 in Germany, right?
It's 112 here, actually.
Oh, 112. Okay. Yeah. So you call emergency services to come and
Yeah.
help you. So you need that fight, flight, freeze, right? The other time where anxiety is okay is what we call eustress. So this is whenever I try something new. Of course, whenever I try something new, I'm not going to be as confident in myself that I can handle it. So I'm going to have more anxiety. But this is the good kind of anxiety. It keeps us motivated, gets us to try new things. Every time we step outside of our comfort zone, we are going to have a bit more anxiety, but we need to challenge that. That's the good kind of anxiety. If we don't challenge that comfort zone and make it bigger and bigger and bigger, it just gets smaller and smaller. The
Mm.
kind of anxiety that causes problems is when it's that sense of danger. So when
Mm.
I'm worrying in my head about things that aren't actually happening. So if I'm sitting in my home where everything is safe, no one's around, and I'm thinking, What if someone comes and bangs on my door? What if someone tries to break in? I'm creating these what if scenarios where my brain now thinks I'm in danger, but I'm not really in danger. And so
Mm.
those what if scenarios can be really, really significant. So that kind of anxiety we call kind of from a sense of danger, where I'm creating this sense of danger, but I'm not really in danger. That can be things like the what if scenarios, overthinking, negative thoughts, paranoid thoughts, can't let things go. They just continue to ruminate over and over and over again, brain bouncing from thing to thing all over the place. Just a really, really fast moving brain is often a sign of more of that sense of danger that's
I
happening.
hope you're enjoying this conversation so far. As you probably have noticed, the Awake Insights podcast is more than just a place for great conversations. It's part of something bigger, the True Impact Club. The True Impact Club is a supportive community for anyone who feels called to share an important message or story and wants to reach a bigger audience. Whether you're looking to step onto stages, get featured on podcasts, or simply amplify your voice, the True Impact Club is here to help. They don't only support you in preparing for these opportunities, but also ensure you have a seamless follow-up system in place. That way, when people are inspired by your message, you can connect with them, build meaningful relationships, and even turn those connections into clients. If this resonates with you, or you want to find ways to make a bigger impact, you can find free resources on the website you can find here below. Thank you very much, and let's go back to the conversation. Okay, so where does it really come from?
Again, it's so part of it is the trauma that we experience. If it's not handled in a healthy way, it creates our brain to experience more. If I grew up in a home where my parents, the people that are supposed to keep me safe, are fighting and yelling all the time, every
Mm.
time they yell, I go into that fight, flight, freeze response, right? And so over time, now my brain starts knowing I know it's going to happen, but I don't know when. So my brain starts looking for that danger, even though it's not there. That creates a pattern of thinking that continues. So now I'm on my own, living on my own, not even living with anyone who's yelling, but my brain is now still programmed to be looking for danger. So now I'm creating these scenarios in my head where I'm thinking there might be danger, but there really isn't. For
Yeah,
people who have really high anxiety, they can have those sense of dangers hundreds of times a day. It
yeah,
has a massive impact on the brain.
yeah,
And when we go into that fight, flight, freeze, what happens is adrenaline gets dumped into our body. So
yeah.
adrenaline is that boost of energy that gets us ready to fight or to run away from a situation. So
Mm.
real danger, that's a good thing. We need that. Happens once in a while, we can recover from it. Sense of danger, where that's happening hundreds of times a day, it has a massive impact. We see people that they can't really sit still. They're always fidgeting and they got to tap their foot and play with their hair or, chew on a pen. They're trying to burn off and use that adrenaline that's continuously being dumped into their body. But
Yeah,
the other problem with this is, where does that come from? That energy from the adrenaline has to come from somewhere. So what
mhm,
happens is all of our non-vital organs get zapped of energy. So bladder, bowel, immune system, stomach, pancreas, they all get zapped of energy every time we go into the fight, flight, freeze. So
mm,
real danger happens once in a while. Again, we can recover from it. It's not that big of a deal. Happening hundreds of times a day, it's going to have a massive impact on our physical health. If my stomach is being zapped hundreds of times a day, it's not going to produce or process food properly. It's just
mhm.
not. Even
Yeah,
cancer cells are connected to it because cancer cells feed off of unhealthy cells. My body is constantly in recovery from adrenaline. I'm not going to be able to recover from any other illnesses and stuff. It just takes longer to happen.
yeah,
So while that's happening in the body, we also have something happening in the brain. What happens is a chemical called cortisol gets dumped into your brain. So that fight, flight, freeze response is in a really small part of your brain called the amygdala. That amygdala is never going to win over the big brain. The big brain's just too strong, too powerful. So what
yeah,
happens is cortisol gets dumped into your brain and shuts it off. So all that's working now is that amygdala. Do I run? Do I hide? Do I fight? So our ability to use logic and reason, understand consequences, sequence events, connect to emotions, memory, they're all significantly impacted because we have high levels of cortisol in our brain. We
Yeah.
know that kids who grow up in a home where there's a lot of volatility and chaos, their brains are being dumped with cortisol regularly. It's connected to anxiety, attention deficit, focus problems, learning disabilities. It changes the way we think. So it has
Yeah.
a massive impact on our body for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you generalize that with people that are suffering from trauma, that these symptoms that you just described, that most people are having this, or is it specifically those people that having that anxiety that you're talking about? Or is that anxiety always included in trauma patients?
I have yet to meet one that isn't. So there usually is a similarity there for sure. But the symptoms of anxiety can look different. There are, many different symptoms. We're all humans, so it all looks a bit different. But we generally find that there's often some common things that are happening. So it affects my breathing. Some people are holding their breath. Some people are sighing. Some people are shallow breathing. Some people are hyperventilating. So we often see it affecting breath, but that can look a little bit different of what it actually looks like. There are a variety of different symptoms of anxiety. We often know what our anxiety looks like when it's really, really, really high, but we don't necessarily know what it looks like lower on a scale. Let's say a 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 10, which means I can't do anything about my anxiety until it's really, really, really high. So part of what we want to do to help us manage anxiety is become more aware of what does my anxiety look lower on the scale so I can put strategies in place there, but so it doesn't have to get really, really high. For me, I get like a red hot poker through my right shoulder blade. So when my anxiety gets to about a 4 or 5, I know that's going to happen. So I put strategies in place there, bring my anxiety back down, then it doesn't have to go to that next level. So it really is about becoming aware of what your body is telling you. If I'm feeling anxiety, if I can understand what's going on and use it as a tool to manage my body, that's going to be much more successful and bring that anxiety down rather than thinking, oh my goodness, I've got anxiety, it's getting higher, and feeling powerless to it.
Yeah. Now, when I spoke to you, you said very quickly, "I have a waiting list. Like people are waiting to work with me." And based on all the other conversations that I also had here in the Awake Insight show, I notice a lot of similarities, and that gives me the idea that many people might suffer from this anxiety, but without even knowing it. Um, do you have numbers about this, some research, or do you have an idea how many people are having this specific symptoms, or yeah, how you call it, basically trauma response?
it- I think it's pretty high. And everyone, even that definition of trauma, right? For some people, that's really significant experiences, a lot of really significant abuse. Other people, it may be a trauma, but not as significant, right? It's not as obvious. Neglect, right? If my parents don't really pay attention to me, I'm kind of on my own. That's trauma. Sure, I'm
Mm,
not getting beat, but it definitely is trauma. So that can look a bit different. But our bodies, we all physiologically are the same. And so
mm,
we often see those symptoms often looking very similar. And that's part of why I wrote the book, is because anyone who picks it up, they're going to find things in there where they go, ooh, that's about me. That's connected to me directly. Because we are very similar in those ways, even though it looks a bit different for sure.
yeah, yeah. So these symptoms and the anxiety is something that builds up over time. And you said it can start also, yeah, before birth, and then it continues developing after birth in the first 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and so on. What is the average age of people that you're working with when they realize, okay, there's something wrong with me? What is it exactly? And that they then discover that it's this anxiety that you're talking about. And then I'm also curious, and that's maybe then another question, how much time people need actually to overcome this?
Okay, so um, I've seen a bit of a change in my practice over the last 15 years that I've kind of been up and running. When I first started, I saw a lot of people, mostly women, who were in their 30s, 40s, even mid 40s, where, things are settled down, kids are a bit older, and now they're going, oh, something's up with me. I just feel I want to work on me. So they start becoming more aware. Often not aware it's even anxiety, but they know they just aren't content with their life the way it is. A lot of my clients, when they come in, say, I don't have anxiety, because it's something that gradually grows throughout your life. And so you just adapt and adapt and adapt, and you don't really even realize it. You just think fidgety is just part of your personality. You don't
Mm.
realize that, no, that's actually a symptom of your anxiety. So, one of the things I do with my clients right at the very beginning is we look at a pretty significant list of symptoms of anxiety. And almost all of my clients are surprised that there's things on there that they didn't realize or weren't aware that were connected to anxiety. And often they're lower on the list. Most of my clients know what it looks like when they're having a panic attack, but they didn't necessarily realize that, chewing on their lip was a symptom of their anxiety when it was a lot lower. So it takes time to kind of figure that out and understand it. And we just, we're pretty adaptable creatures. And so, the anxiety just grows and grows and grows, and we just adjust and adjust and adjust, and often aren't even aware it's there.
Yeah.
As for how long it takes, that depends. Some people's anxiety isn't as significant or as severe as other people's. Some people are coming into counseling and they're ready. They're like, I want to figure this out. Others aren't quite as sure what they want to do. So it varies. And it is something that I mean, once you're aware, you want to be aware for the rest of your life. It's something that you're always going to be aware of, but it doesn't become as significant where you have to look at it, think about it every single day. So that usually takes a bit of time, at least a good 6 months, to kind of really get a much better handle on what your anxiety is looking like.
Yeah.
In the last few years, I've seen more clients that are a bit younger, in their mid to late 20s, who are coming into counseling. I think we're talking more about it in schools about anxiety, so they are more aware. So they're actually trying to access services a bit sooner. And one of the big things that I've seen is a difference in men. When I started, I didn't have very many men, and if it was, they were often with their partners.
Mm.
Um, Now my clientele is about 50-50, men and women. I did a workshop for my community this past week, and we were almost half men and women. So we're seeing a shift where men are now saying, I don't need to be this tough, suck it up, pretend everything's fine and dandy. I can tell that something's up with me. I'm not content, and I'm okay to say, hey, what do you got that can help me sort through this? So I think that's a huge shift for men as well, especially men in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on.
Just a quick note. I want to share something that might be valuable for those who are looking to grow their brand or their business. The True Impact Agency is a digital marketing team that supports you in building everything from marketing funnels, landing pages, to ad campaigns and custom websites. Their focus is equipping you with the right strategies and systems to elevate your business and presence. If that sounds interesting, visit True Impact Agency to learn more and book a free consultation call. It's a great opportunity to clarify your goals and take meaningful steps forward. And let's go back to the conversation. Yeah, totally. I'm really happy to hear that because just in general in the wellness scene and all different of modalities, mostly women are taking the first step in their process, in their healing journey. And for men, it's much more complicated because they feel more shame around these kind of things and they think they cannot show their vulnerability and they just ignore all of that basically. And it's really good to hear that is changing. That's really good
There's much
evolution.
more, yeah, there's much more social stigma attached to men, you know, being emotionless,
Yeah.
but they're human just like everyone else. When I had my office, right now I do virtual out of my home, but when I first started up, I had an office space, and often my men clients, they wouldn't come and sit in the waiting room. They wouldn't
Mm.
even park in front of my building. They would park a block away, and I'd have to text and say, okay, you could come in. They'd put their hoodies on, run up to my office, and kind of sneak in through the back door. But
Mm.
honestly, after about 3 or 4 sessions, they're like, "Give me your card. I gotta tell my buddies about this." Once they realize that, "Oh, man, I can figure things out. I've got a better understanding of what's going on." the men clients and the women clients, they jump right in and they want to work on things. So it's really about kind of breaking outside of that stereotype that society says, oh, no, no, men need to just be tough, lock it down, pretend everything's fine and dandy. Comes
Mm.
at a cost.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. So explain a little bit, how does a work really look like? So someone comes to you, someone have discovered, yeah, I'm really having this anxiety, feeling not good enough. So how you start working with them?
So, one of the first things we do is we always spend some time talking about anxiety, getting a better understanding of how anxiety works in their body, what their symptoms of anxiety looks like. We look at a variety of different strategies we can use to help manage anxiety. Just want to bring that down because when we start digging into things and resolving the past trauma, that's going to create anxiety. So, we need to have them have a good skill set of being aware of what their anxiety is looks like and knowing strategies that they can use that are going to be helpful as well. Once we've done that, then we go through what's called the gathering information stage. And this is where basically they tell me their entire life story. As I'm going through and listening to this, I'm figuring out what are the things that have impacted and contributed to that core belief not good enough, not important, not valued. Once we're done that story, then we start going through and sorting through the experiences that have created and developed that core belief. So they get some resolve, feeling the emotions, sorting through emotions that are connected to it, and looking at it from a different perspective, realizing that this really wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It was that people didn't know how to handle the situation. People didn't feel they were good enough, so they weren't able to provide the care and the support and love that I should have got. And so we work through that where they're sorting through that stage of it. Then we get to what's called the maintenance stage. This is where it the client's doing really well. That core belief is much more good enough, important, and valued, but we need to maintain it. Most of my clients, if they're coming in, 30 years old, they're in counseling for 2 years. That's only 1/15th of their life. And so the chances they fall back into their old ways of doing things is really high. So we use a maintenance process where they continue to come every couple months, every 3 months, every 6 months, and just keep touching base to make sure they're staying focused on this new way of thinking and challenging that core belief and aren't slipping back. We all slip back. It's catching yourself and bringing yourself back to where you are. So we use the maintenance. Maintenance can last easily another year as well.
Mm, yeah. So it is only talk therapy, if I understand well. Is that what it is? Or do you also use certain kind of tools that people can integrate? How does that look like?
We This model of therapy uses about 13 different models of therapy. So we use a lot of talk therapy, we use a psychoeducational therapy, we use cognitive behavioral therapy, DBT. We do a lot of writing and journaling. We do story writing, letter writing. There's a wide variety of different tools that we use depending on what part of the process we're going through and each client is a little bit different, so I have to kind of adapt to make sure that I'm meeting the needs of the individual clients as well.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, because what I learned over time here and speaking with coaches and healers, they in many cases in treatments they go from the mind into the body, and I'm curious if that is something that you also practice and that you know how that specifically works, because that's a modality that is a lot used in trauma healing, where emotions getting stored in the body, and then you use different kind of modalities actually to you release these suppressed emotions. It goes a bit further than anxiety, I guess, because there's all kinds of emotions that can be stored there. So in that sense, you can use different modalities to tap into the subconscious mind actually, and then go into these different emotions to release them. I'm sure you are aware of this kind of work. Is that something that you practice as well with your patients, or that's not specifically something that is a good way to help your patients? Can you explain that a little bit?
That's kind of at the core of resolving trauma is the experiences are over with. They're done. There's nothing you can do. We can't go back and change them. What we carry with us is the emotional impact of all of
Mhm.
those experiences. So that's a big part of the resolve part of my practice, where we're going through getting a better understanding of what are the emotions and letting out and sorting through the emotions. We have a thought that creates a chemical reaction that we then feel physiologically in our body. So we need
Mm,
to get better at recognizing what am I feeling, what are the emotions, and why are they there? What's the thought that's kind of creating and feeding these emotions? So we spend a lot of time focusing on that. We can easily spend, simply just 2 or 3 sessions really just talking about emotions. Tell me a time in your life where you felt scared. What did that feel like in your body? We start at the head and work all the way down. What did your head feel like? Your eyes, your mouth, your shoulders, your chest, your stomach, your hands. We go through the whole body of what it feels like to feel scared. And then we talk about some times in our life where we felt scared. So we're
mm,
learning to slowly allow ourselves to feel that emotion where it's not overwhelming.
mm,
And we go through and do that for a variety of different emotions. One of the things I do with my clients is I give them a list of emotions. If I've spent most of my life suppressing and pushing down my emotions, and now I have to try to feel them, I often come up blank, or,
mm.
the few basic ones: happy, angry, scared, mad, anxious. But vulnerable, lonely, sad, rejection, abandoned, helpless, hopeless, those ones we don't even really know exist. So looking at a list is really significant. So part of what I do is get my clients to print off the emotion list and put them everywhere. Put one in the kitchen, one in the living room, one in the car, one on your phone, and then when you're feeling something, but you're not sure what it is, grab the list and read through it. The emotions that you are feeling, you will recognize them. They will jump off the page. And so now you can start to become aware of what those emotions really are. General rule of thumb is we don't ever really just feel one emotion. It's usually a bit of a combination of a bunch of different emotions. And so that can be overwhelming in itself. I don't have to just feel one, I have to feel five, six, or seven. I'm just not going to feel any at all. So we need to get better at being able to recognize those emotions. But in order to do that, we have to first be aware of what they are. So we want to
Yeah.
work on that awareness and then slowly get better at feeling that emotion so it's not overwhelming.
Yeah, I can imagine in some cases that can take a lot of time as well because I'm aware of people that suppressed all their emotions. And then if you ask them to feel in certain emotions or they read that list that you just explained, that, yeah, it's not going to come up immediately. So because these emotions are suppressed for such a long time.
And in a way, that's kind of what we want. We don't want them to flood. That's just too overwhelming. So even just starting to talk about the emotions, what it might feel like in your body, because a lot of clients will say, "Well, I don't know." I'll say, "Well, what do you think it might be?" That's a little bit safer. I'm a bit more willing to take that risk. Often, what we do is even talk about third person. So if I'm working with a family who has kids who haven't talked about emotions, we talk about, when you're reading a story, just stop and think, what is that character feeling right now? It's much easier for me to tell you what I think you might be feeling than to actually tell you what I'm feeling. But really, I don't know what you're feeling. What I'm telling you is what I would feel in that situation. So if I slowly become aware of what those emotions are, then it's not as overwhelming and it's not as scary. So we want to start very slowly and build that confidence. Every time I think, well, I did talk about feeling lonely or feeling abandoned, and I handled it, it was okay. I'm building my confidence. I'm creating that core belief: good enough, important, and valued. So then by the time we get to really resolving trauma, where there's a whole bunch of emotion, I'm going to feel much more confident in myself that I can handle doing it, because I've had all these small practices of being able to feel emotions in very small pieces. So we slowly build over a period of
Yeah.
time. I take very, very, very basic small steps in pretty much everything
Mm,
we do.
yeah. 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 So,
More, yeah.
yeah, I was going to ask actually. So, let's talk a little bit about strategies. People that have these kind of symptoms and develop that over the years, they also develop strategies to to cope with it, to maybe not feel it. They don't know what's going on, so they develop ways to feel better, let's say. These strategies, they are sometimes so ingrained for so many years, for so long actually, that with the work that you do, you have to go through that and teach someone other strategies actually, and unlearn the strategies that they have used that whole time to cope with these kind of symptoms. What strategies do you actually use, and what do you teach actually, so that they can start being more aware of those feelings, and also develop ways to learn to live with it?
So right in the very beginning, we talk about strategies. Um, there's a large variety of different strategies we can use. A really, really significant one is breathing. There's research that shows that taking deep breaths actually stops cortisol from being dumped into your brain. So, cortisol is that chemical that gets dumped when we're feeling anxiety. So, if I breathe, it actually stops that from happening. So, we talk about different ways of breathing. We also talk about how our thoughts create our emotions. So if I can get better at challenging my thoughts and breathe at the same time, I'm going to be using two major strategies that are going to bring my anxiety down. So we talk about things like, you breathe in through your nose, the air feels cold. You breathe out through your mouth, the air feels warm. So if I say in my head, in, calm, cool, out, worry, warm, well, that's my thought. What emotion does that create? Calm, content, neutral. So I'm controlling my thoughts and I'm breathing. Now, for some of my clients who have a really high anxiety, they can't even get through that one time without that anxious thought coming
Mm,
back in. Our brain can only have one conscious thought at a time, but it can switch in and out really, really quickly. So we just keep working on it. Just that's the goal. Just do it one time. Maybe it takes a month, but within a month, they're now able to do it one time. Then we work on doing it two times. So we want to slowly work on increasing and being aware of our breathing. I always say to my clients, don't wait until your anxiety is really, really high to breathe. Breathe throughout the day. If every time you look at your phone, you have a drink of water, you take a deep breath or two, you're going to notice a difference in your anxiety level at the end of the day. You just kind of are resetting yourself when you're breathing. So breathing is a really, really healthy coping strategy. Again, being aware of your thoughts and challenging those thoughts is really important. Again, problem with that is 80% of our thoughts are unconscious. We're not even aware they're there. For people who have high anxiety, a lot of those anxious thoughts are in that unconscious thinking. So we have to become more aware of what we are thinking so we can get better at challenging those thoughts. Again, that takes time and lots and lots and lots of practice to get there for
yeah,
sure. Another really significant coping strategy is writing. When we write, we tap more into our unconscious. We get to those deeper levels of thinking that we're not even aware are really happening. So, writing is really good. Go back and read your writing because often when you're writing, you just write really fast. You're not even aware if it comes out unconsciously. So, going back and reading over that writing can be really insightful as to what's going on. Often clients kind of say, what should be some writing topics that I can use? Problem is we don't know where your brain needs to go. So we need to keep the topics very general. I often say start with, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? I'm feeling really off this week. Why? And go through and sort through that in that way in the writing. The other thing you can do with writing is if you're feeling off, you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling angry, whatever it might be, anxious, go ahead and take a look at what has your life been like the last week? What are some experiences that you've been through? So maybe you got in a fight with your partner. You have a major deadline coming up at work, and your fridge is making a weird noise, and you're probably going to have to replace it. So we look at those events, then we go back and say, okay, what emotions do you feel when you think about each one of those? So fighting with my partner, get out my emotions list. I look through that. What emotions does that create? Deadline at work, what emotions does that create? My fridge, what emotions does it create? Then we go back again and we look at what core belief is being triggered. Not good enough, not important, not valued. Could be one, two, or all three. So we go back and look at that for, argument with my partner, deadline at work, and the fridge. Even just going through and doing that, most people feel better after because they've acknowledged that emotion. They've got a bit of understanding what's going on. It's not really about those things that have happened. It's what I think about those things that creates that stress. So using writing as a tool to help you see that and understand it a bit more can be really, really, really helpful for sure.
Do you recommend to use it as a kind of a routine on daily basis, or do you recommend to do that in moments when you are, yeah, having a hard time? How do you look at that?
As needed. That can be one of the stressors. I hear clients say that all the time. Oh, I don't journal because I did it for a week and then I forgot about it. And so then I didn't do it at all. Do it as needed. If I'm doing good, I'm having a good day, everything's feeling great, I don't might not need to write. Maybe I do that for a week, a couple weeks, a month, maybe even a couple months, but then I start feeling off again. That's a good time to go ahead and use that strategy to help you figure out and sort through what's going on. So it should be, all of these things should be as needed. What do I need to do to help me kind of bring myself back to where I want to be?
Mm. Yeah, it's sorry, yeah,
And
continue.
I was just going to say another really, really significant strategy is making a plan. So, where I'm controlling my thoughts, if I have an anxious thought and I just try to pretend it's not there, it doesn't go away. It usually gets bigger and louder. So, part of what we want to do is make a plan. My member anxiety is lack of confidence, not believing in myself I can handle something. If I make a plan, I'm going to feel way more confident in my ability to handle that situation. So let's say, for example, I'm feeling really anxious because I'm going for a job interview. So I make a plan. What's that going to look like? Do I want to arrive early? Do I want what outfit am I going to wear? I'm going to look on the internet and look up some interview questions, and I'm going to practice. I'm going to get a friend to kind of ask me these questions so I can practice it out loud. So I'm making a plan on how I can handle that interview. I'm going to feel way more confident than going into it just blindly. Making a plan is a really effective tool for real situations, but it also works for that sense of danger situations. So if I'm sitting at home thinking, what if someone comes and breaks into my house? It hasn't happened, it's never happened. I can still make a plan. Well, what would I do? Well, I always make sure my phone is charged. I make sure I know what the number is. I always lock my doors at night before I go to bed or when I'm home alone. I have an escape route where I can go through the back door or the window or whatever it is. So even though it's never happened, I still make a plan for how I handle it. Then when my brain goes, "Oh, what if someone tries to break into my house?" My brain goes, "Oh, I know what I do. I have a plan to handle it." So now that anxious thought often goes away, and if it doesn't go away, it subsides significantly. So now I'm more able to manage it when it comes up. So making a plan really works for those anxious thoughts as well. We often don't challenge them. We just let them spin and spin and
Mm,
spin and spin, and they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. We're way more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. If we stop and really think, what would I do if this actually happened? We handle it. Might not be fun, might not be
mm,
easy, might not even be very graceful at it, but we would handle it. Once we realize that, we build that
yeah.
confidence.
Yeah, that's definitely good advice. On the other hand, you cannot be prepared for everything. Um, what comes up in me when you're explaining that is some situation that I had some time ago when um, someone is not respecting an agreement. You have to hire a lawyer for that. You know, some things will come out of that, some response, some reaction. Um, you don't know the outcome of that, but it can down on you because I know from the past that this kind of situations, I'm already trying to make that story in my mind. Like, if this gonna happen, then I have to do this. If this gonna happen, then I have to do this. So you're actually doing that process already before it's even starts. And I'm able to stop that because I know I cannot control it. My lawyer will take care of it, and it will only make me feel miserable if I continuously start having that conversation or yeah, just yeah, go in that situation in the future, not knowing what is gonna happen and what's gonna come out of that. So yeah, Do you recognize this, that voice in the mind that can start talking and, yeah, try to see the situation and try to already, yeah, like make you at ease, but it's the opposite effect that starts to happen in your body. So
Right. So that a common one that we hear for that, I hear for that in my agency is, a family's getting divorced. And so lawyers are involved. You don't know what the outcome is. It's not something that's over in a week or two. It takes months
yeah.
to go through it. And so again, we make a plan. So how do you handle right now today? What's going on today that you need to address? Do you need to look at getting a lawyer? Okay, how do you do that? Right? Let's look into different lawyers, ask friends who to recommend, those kind of things. Big picture down the road, we have no control over that. What do you feel? Right? So then we go back to the emotions list. I feel fear. I feel anxious. I feel powerless. I feel lonely, whatever it might be. And then we'll often talk about how common is that emotion throughout your life? Powerless, right? So when I'm feeling powerless right now in dealing with the divorce, I realize that's not just about right now. There's been many, many times throughout my life where I felt powerless and I haven't dealt with it. I've pushed it down. So it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So now powerless is overwhelming because it's all these other emotions as well. So we need to talk about those emotions that those experiences create and help us get better at being able to sort through and feel those emotions for sure. There's always going to be things that are unexpected. We can't control that. But the better I get at feeling my emotions, sorting through my emotions, making a plan, the more confident I'm going to feel like I can handle it. Might not be
Mm.
easy, right? Worst case scenario, we often go to what is the worst case scenario of what could happen? Well, I have to declare bankruptcy or whatever it might be. Okay, so you have to declare bankruptcy. What do you do? Well, you get back on your feet, you figure it out, you do what you need to do. You would still manage it. And so we have to do a combination of all those things. But a really significant one for stuff like that is the emotion. What are you feeling? What are you feeling? What are you feeling? Really important to go through and acknowledge those emotions and try to feel them as you're going through the process. Because if it takes 6 months to deal with it and your emotion is just building and
Mm.
building and building, yeah, you're going to get more and more and more stressed throughout it for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, and it doesn't serve you in any way. So what you're actually explaining is like just, yeah, be in the present moment. That's the best place you can be, and not trying to be
Right.
in the future because the future doesn't exist. You don't know what's going to happen in the future, and just, yeah, look and try to feel what's going on right now, and maybe investigate that and see what you can do with it. Why the feeling is there. Yeah.
Right. How it's connected to, to past experiences. A really, really common ones that we hear is that powerlessness. Another one is feeling unheard. And so often, when we're getting into things like court battles and things like that, it often is those emotions, powerless and unheard. When we think about it, those are things that we've often experienced a lot throughout our lives as well. So understanding that, oh, this is something that I've been carrying for a really long time allows you to get a better understanding of what's going on. Makes you feel more empowered in being able to actually feel that emotion and sort through
Mm.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not a one-time thing. If you've been carrying emotions for 30 years, you can't feel it one time and go, "Okay, I'm all better." No,
That's
that's
not how
not
it
the way it
works.
works. It takes many times of going back over and feeling it. But generally, what we do see is every time you really acknowledge and sort through that emotion, it becomes a little bit less scary and a little bit less emotion because you're letting it out and you're practicing so you feel more confident being able
Mm.
to do it. So it gets a bit more manageable each time you do it
Mm.
as well.
Yeah. So what you do right now with your clients, is that on a weekly basis that you have like a talk session with them?
Typically, most of my clients are biweekly. We're talking about anxiety. They need some time in between sessions to really stop and be aware of what their body is doing, what their brain is doing, so they can figure out what their symptoms are. They need time to practice strategies, find strategies that work. Um, Telling the story, it takes a lot of energy. So having a bit of time to recover can be good, especially because most of my clients have their own
Mm.
lives going. Well, they all have their own lives going on, and they're working, and they have family, and they have, all these other experiences. So we need to find that balance where counseling isn't too much, it's too overwhelming. They're still able to manage it within their life. And then the finances are also an issue as well. I'm private practice, so it my clients pay for my services. So biweekly is usually a good balance where we're able to continue to move through things, but it's at a level that's manageable for everyone as
Mm.
well.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious because what you explained actually on how to work with that and how to go in that trajectory of healing, let's say, it's a lot just tracking what's going on in what's happening in your life, how you feel with that, of how you feel about it, um, being aware of it, and then act based on that. And that's then the whole process that you do over months and maybe years and things like that. You also have modalities that are more intense. You talked about breath work. So you have intense breathwork sessions where you go really heavy in breathing and then where you are able to go in the subconscious and go deeper and deeper and deeper and see what comes out of that. Is that something that you would recommend to combine with the counseling that you provide? How do you look at these kind of modalities? I'm curious about it. And also meditation, but that's another thing. But I also want to know your stance about meditation.
Again, everyone is a bit different, right? So some people, I have yoga instructors that are clients, and so they are very aware and do a lot of breath work and a lot of meditation and those kind of things, and it works very, very well for them. Other people, it doesn't. I live in northern BC where a lot of the guys that I'm working with are working 16, 18-hour days at camp. And they're out at camp for 2, 3, 4 weeks or longer. So those opportunities are a bit more limited, right? So it really kind of depends on individual people. We usually talk about, what they're using, what strategies they're using, how well they're working. And then if it's working for them, great. I think that that's an important tool for them to continue to use for
Mm,
sure.
yeah, because a lot has to do with relaxation. I see that always comes back in different modalities. You have hypnotherapy, you have breathwork sessions. So yeah, you have like psychedelics. You have different kind of modalities that you can use, but it all comes down to be able to go in that relaxed state so that you start feeling and you start noticing that maybe things will come up so that you can really process that at that moment what comes up. It can be everything is possible. The things will come that need to come. It's actually what they always say. And that relaxation, I don't see that so much in what you explain. So yeah, I'm just curious about that, how that is different. Like yeah, talk therapy and that's like by talking. I'm sure that's something that can be powerful by talking, and the emotion comes and all these kind of things. But that relaxation, I learned over time that that's quite important actually. That to come in that state for things to come up.
That's one of the things that we kind of see often happens as a consequence of challenging that core belief. So as that core belief changes, I get better at understanding my anxiety, managing my anxiety, using strategies to manage my anxiety. I just start feeling calmer and calmer and calmer. And so it often is a piece that we don't have to spend a bunch of time really focusing directly on because it comes as we go. If I'm working with a client and I can see they're off, I'll stop them and say, "Okay, wait, just stop. Take a few breaths, let yourself kind of settle, and then let's go with where we're going." One of the things I tell my clients right from the very beginning is if I see them feeling emotion, I'm just going to sit quietly and not say anything. I want them to feel what they're feeling. As soon as I say anything, they shut down that emotion immediately. So we talk about that. We make sure we honor those spaces when they do happen, where if someone needs to take a second and feel their emotions, sort through things, settle themselves down, we definitely do that as well for sure.
Mm, yeah. Another thing is it has a lot to do with the nervous system. and how you regulate the nervous system. I haven't heard you mention that. It's something that I'm learning more and more of in the last few months. I want to know, how much do we have to understand about the nervous system to heal ourselves, and to, because like anxiety, that's something that's directly into the nervous system, right? And in the nervous system, there you have different stages where you can be in, from green to red, and everything in between. How much do we have to know and understand about that to become better?
Again, so I think that's kind of the way we kind of tap into that is through that anxiety. Anxiety is definitely a reflection of that nervous system. If I'm feeling um, more anxiety, my nervous system is going to be engaged a lot more for sure. So by looking at those symptoms of anxiety, we're really looking at what is my nervous system telling me as it's becoming more and more significant and becoming aware. What I generally do is break it down into 4 stages, and the clients go through and look at what is their anxiety level at a low level, when it's a little bit higher, when it's getting there, it's pretty intense, and when
Mm.
it's really 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 high. So that is a direct reflection of what their nervous system is. So now they've got a good plan of what it looks like at a 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then we focus on what are the symptoms there. 'Cause sometimes they can have 15, 20 symptoms at each level, so I don't wanna have to remember all of those. But what are the ones that are pretty consistent, that happen pretty regularly at those level? So often at a 2, I find I'm holding my breath. So now I'm gonna start to become more aware when I'm at a 2, and I'm gonna put those strategies in place. So we look at what are the symptoms as it becomes progressively more and more significant, and then we go back and we create a plan. Remember, making a plan makes us feel more confident, of strategies. What are strategies I'm gonna use at a 1? What are strategies I'm going to use out of 2? What are strategies I'm going to use out of 3? What are strategies I'm going to use out of 4? And often, once we hit 2, 3, 4, we're getting into taking a break, whether it's going to my own space, whether it's going for a walk, going for a drive, taking a bit of a break to let things kind of settle back down. Breathing is also at each stage. Maybe I breathe at a 1, regularly, a couple times every couple hours. At a 2, maybe once I hold my breath, I start realizing, okay, I need to take some deeper breaths. So every time I find myself holding my breath, I'm going to take a minute and do some deep breathing. At a 3, maybe I'm breathing for a bit more, 2, 3, 4 minutes. At a 4, maybe I'm going for a walk and doing some deep breathing, where I'm working on bringing those strategies down.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. It sounds a bit like it's just a different terminology. So you're talking about levels of anxiety. In other cases, what I just explained, we're talking about a level of nervous system charge. Maybe you can call it something like that. And then I asked myself the question: if your nervous system is charged, is it always anxiety? Is most of the time anxiety, or can it be something else as well?
I think it can be something else as well, but the chances that anxiety is at least a part of it is going to be there as
Mm.
well, for sure. Even if we look at things where you have, an autoimmune system a disease or something which can trigger that nervous system, or some sort of a physical ailment that can trigger that nervous system. What happens is now I think, oh, is that my illness, or what's going on, right? And so it might not be, but now my anxiety is more
Mm.
significant because I'm worried about that illness being triggered, or
Mm.
escalating. So we often see anxiety being kind of connected with that as
Mm.
well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Totally. Yeah, it's just a matter of where you focus on, I think. It's what book you read sometimes, or what people you encounter. Everybody has their own perspective and their own way of looking at things, but it all comes down in many cases to the same kind of thing, right? Yeah.
I think so. As humans, we all have all these different, experiences and terminologies and strategies and all these things, but they all kind of filter down into a very similar
Yeah, yeah,
funnel,
yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
sure.
Super interesting. Yeah. Is there something that you find important to share that we haven't talked about? Some kind of topic that you want to share with, yeah, with the audience?
I think. One of the things we touched on just a little bit, but is probably important if someone's really thinking about working on themselves, is we just really need to go really, really, really slow. Often people with higher anxiety, they kind of, go from all to nothing. So I'm not really exercising at all. So now I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week. And now I'm stiff and I'm sore and my body hurts. So after 3 weeks, I don't do it anymore. Right. Whereas if I slowly work on changing that, I don't really exercise, well, now I'm gonna try to just walk around my house a little bit
Mm,
more. Then I'm gonna walk to my mailbox. Then I'm gonna walk around the block or maybe even just to the end of the street and back, and slowly make those changes. What I'm doing every time I'm doing that is building my confidence and my ability to do it, but I also start realizing, "Oh, that actually feels good. I actually enjoy that. That's better for me." And so now my urge to continue to do it becomes more and more
mm,
significant. So we need to break things down into extremely small steps. If you go to do something and you're procrastinating, you don't want to do it, think, how can I break this down into an even smaller step so that I feel more like I can handle that step? Procrastination is often a symptom of anxiety. I don't believe in myself I can handle doing it, so I just
yeah,
avoid it. Break it down into really small steps. I'm going to feel more confident in myself that I can handle it. Practice or small step and then practice. Don't jump right to the next step the next day. You may practice that small step for a couple weeks, a month, a couple months, and then add another step. We need to build those pathways in our brain where it's becoming more and more and more of a
mm,
natural response. I always say to my clients, we want evolution, not revolution. Small, gradual change over a long period of time is much more sustainable than
yeah.
quick change. So that would be something if you're starting out on anything new, break it down into as small steps as you can.
Mm, yeah. Many people are very impatient by nature, so I think the only motivator to continue doing that is when you start to notice the benefits of it. Can you share how soon you can notice benefits of that if you start doing this over a few weeks, months? That you see, okay, something is really changing. I feel more calmer. I respond differently in this kind of situation, and this motivates me to continue doing this.
With my clients, even just looking at the symptoms of anxiety makes them feel better. For a lot of people, they feel like anxiety is kind of this cloud that overcomes them and they have no
Mm,
control over it. Once you realize you're creating it with your own thoughts and you can become more aware, you can challenge, you can become aware of what it looks like, it's pretty empowering. So even just becoming aware, right? In anything new that we learn, the very first step is awareness. Once you're aware, then you can do something different. If you're not aware, nothing's going to change. So often even that awareness can be very empowering because now you can see what's going on. Now you can start to figure out what you need to do about it. You have to keep working on it. And that's where, again, if we go in small stages, you can see that a little bit more clearly, a little bit more clearly. And instead of hoping for great big gains, I'm looking for little gains, but I'm going to see them a bit more regularly because they are
mm,
smaller.
mm, mm, mm. Okay. So specifically, this modality that you're doing right now with your clients, how long are you doing this specifically, and how is that evolved over time?
So when I was teaching, I went to a workshop on suicide that was presented by a man named Tony Martins, looking at suicide through the perspective of that core belief. At the end of that 3 day workshop, I just thought, this is what I need to do. So I started working with Tony. It took about a year of us going back and forth before I quit teaching and started my own private practice. Did a lot of really significant and intense training with Tony for many, many years, where I slowly learned more and more about the model of therapy. And it's just kind of been building since
Yeah.
then for sure. So, I do a ton of reflection after every session that I have. I stop and think, okay, what went well, what didn't, why didn't it go well, what could I do a bit differently? So I'm always learning and trying to figure out what I can do to expand or help my clients learn in maybe a bit of a
Yeah.
different way. Everyone's styles are a little bit different, so it's figuring out how to adapt to that. as a special ed teacher for 20 years, I'm much more aware of noticing those adaptations that I need to maybe put in place for different people. So I continue to evolve, I hope on a daily basis for
Mm,
sure.
yeah. Okay. I'm a little bit curious. So, from what I understand, you come more from kind of a clinical background, or can I say traditional background, psychology, and how that evolved over time. I speak a lot with people that coming from another angle, and this more the spiritual angle, where they sometimes say, "Okay, yeah, spirituality was for me an accelerator. It really helped me to discover things faster, see things in a different perspective." And I'm curious, what is your experience with that? How do you look at it in comparison with the work that you do?
So when I'm working with my clients, one of the things we talk about is how this is a holistic approach: mind, body, emotions, and spirit. When we talk about spirit, though, we're talking about, your spiritual beliefs, your religious beliefs. Doesn't matter what it is. Whatever that belief is for you, that's important to kind of figure out and get a better understanding. But it's also looking much deeper at what are your values? What are your morals? What do you believe about the sense of family, about work ethic? What do you believe about yourself? So we're looking at spirituality at a much broader level than just, kind of your relationship with God or the other entity, what that is. We're looking at it more kind of within ourselves of what do I believe? What are my beliefs? What are my values? When we get to the end of counseling, we get into that maintenance part of the process. We actually do a spirituality and values review where we go back and look at what are your values now in all these areas? What are your behaviors? And how much do they align? Because often we'll see people who have values or beliefs, but their behaviors don't reflect those behaviors or those beliefs. So we look at that and look at how do we work on meshing those a bit more so they become more significant. So we look at it at a much broader sense for sure.
Could it be a distraction as well? Like, could it be a
Sorry?
distraction as well? This is something that comes up.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, you touched a little bit on kind of these coping strategies that we often use to push emotions down. We look at coping strategies, as healthy or unhealthy. It's not actually the coping strategy that is healthy or unhealthy. It's how I choose to
Mm,
use it. So we all need a bit of a distraction. I need time to just unplug, not deal with anything, have a bit of a break. But if that distraction is then making me feel more rejuvenated, more ready to go into life, it's probably a healthy
mm,
coping strategy. If I'm using it to avoid all the time, I'm more tired after I use it, it's likely more than an unhealthy coping strategy. So I can use spirituality as a way to help me feel ready to kind of move into things and deal with life, but I can use it as a distraction to avoid responsibility, avoid feeling my emotions, avoid dealing with my life. We can do that with any coping
yeah.
strategy we use. One of the common ones I hear is video
Mm,
games, right? Oh, video games are horrible. Yeah, a video game is it's a bunch of metal
mm,
and wires. It doesn't have the capacity to be healthy or unhealthy. It's how I choose to use it. So, my sons play video games with guys they've met, that are kind of all over the world right now. They play for a couple hours, a couple times a week, probably a healthy
mm,
coping strategy. But the kid that locks himself in his bedroom and is playing for 8 hours a day and raging in
mm,
his room, or the person who chooses video games from 8 o'clock at night to midnight rather than connecting with their partner, probably more of an unhealthy coping
mm,
strategy. So we distractions are okay. We have to look at how we're using them. Are we using them to make our life better, or are we using them as a way to distract and avoid dealing with
mm.
our life?
Yeah.
That can be
Yeah,
anything.
totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
But spirituality can also be a distraction, and it's funny to say that, like an unconscious distraction. So thinking that spirituality really gonna help and make you better and be more conscious about everything that's happens in your life, and everything happens for a reason, and go into your past and all these kind of things. But on the other hand, maybe it's not the right path to really mm, get better, I would say. I don't know. I'm just asking. It's
I I think, again, I work with people that are all kinds of different religions, atheist, you name it, all kinds of different religions. And it can't be the tool, that's for sure, right? It can be one of the tools depending on how you
Mm,
choose to use
mm,
it for sure. But, you know, anything that we use to extreme is usually more of an
yeah,
unhealthy coping strategy. So if I'm using, my spirituality, exercise, whatever it is, to the extreme, I'm probably using it more as a way of
mm,
avoiding dealing with responsibility on figuring out my own healing and sorting out
yeah,
my own stuff. And a lot it's part of what we do, when we're gonna start digging into things is we go through and spend a few sessions looking at what are your healthy coping strategies? What are your unhealthy
yeah,
coping strategies? Why do you use them? Where did you learn them, right? How much did you learn these from parents, from coaches, from teachers, from friends, right? What do you get out of them? And then with the unhealthy coping strategies, we look at what emotions are
mm,
you suppressing? So when you use that coping strategy, what are you avoiding? What emotion are
yeah,
you avoiding? So that as we're resolving and emotions come up, they go to those unhealthy coping strategies. They can recognize it and go, "Oh, geez, you know what? I just spent 6 hours
mm,
reading rather than doing the homework that I was supposed to be doing. What am I avoiding? Vulnerability, fear, anxiety, self doubt, loneliness, right? All those kind of emotions start to come out. So again, we can even use those unhealthy coping strategies as cues to help us figure out and sort through things. But most of us don't. We use unhealthy coping strategies to just avoid and
yeah,
not deal with it.
totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's just a matter of staying open mind always, and try different things, and always be open for something better, something else, and not just stick to something and think that's the right thing for me. I don't know. That's a bit my experience.
And again, that often comes back to that core belief. So if my core belief is not good enough, I'm not going to believe in myself as much. So I'm not going to be as
Yeah,
open-minded. I'm not going to be as open to other opportunities or other suggestions or challenges. I just need to shut it down my way or the highway. That's all I'm going to do. So you've got to really build that confidence that you believe you can handle having an open mind and looking at different things in different areas. Bottom line, if I don't believe in myself, I can handle doing it, I am
yeah,
not going to do it. So we have to get better at building that confidence piece for sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Amazing. So yeah, you're fully booked, so people are waiting to work with you. I'm curious. You're doing podcasts now. You sharing your message. What is your mission in general? It's not getting more clients, but it's yeah. Can you explain it a little bit more? What is your mission with what you do?
I think my mission is to help people better understand their core belief and to realize that they can do things to change and challenge it. And so, the book, try to get it out to as many people as I can. Doing the podcast, my social media, it's about just providing little pieces of information where people go, "Oh, I never thought about it that way." Challenge themselves to think a little bit different
Yeah,
for sure. I do workshops and presentations as well, and same thing. It's about just getting people to kind of think about things in a bit of a different way where they're broadening their horizons. Every time I think about something a bit different, I'm building that core belief good enough, important, and valued. Jamal's going to be willing to take maybe a bit more of a risk in another
mm,
area as well. So it's just to help people, really, to help people figure out and understand themselves a bit more
mm,
for sure.
okay, yeah. So yeah, if people want to know more about this and go deeper into this, I think the best resource is your book. Are there other resources or other places that people can go through if they want to explore a little bit more about your work?
My website is trobakholistic.org. On my website, I have a page that has all the podcasts that I've done, all the different interviews that has a lot of different information. I have a blog session section that looks at a whole bunch of different areas. Again, short 2 to 4 minute reads. They're not anything that are really intense, but just to give you a little bit of information where you think about things a bit differently. I have a YouTube channel that also talks about this kind of stuff in a bit of different perspectives, and that's Throwback Holistic Counseling. I am also on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, where again, I'm just giving short little pieces of information that hopefully just challenge people to think about things in a bit of a different way for sure.
Cool. Yeah. You seem very present online. I like to hear that. So that's really, really nice that you can use this media actually to spread those messages and to make people more aware of the work that you do. So yeah, thank you for sharing all that important information. It's really nice to see your approach around these topics. And yeah, I learned a lot in this conversation, and I'm sure the audience as well. So yeah, thanks.
Great. That's my goal, Hank. Thank you very much for having me. It was a great conversation with you as well.